It's Calgary's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network.
Hello, this is Bonnie Elgie coming to you today with Calgary's podcast, a member of the Canada's Podcast Network, where we talk to the entrepreneurs who are making it happen here in the city of Calgary, Alberta. Doug Lacombe, MBA, is president and founder of Communicado Inc., a digital marketing agency. Drawing on almost 30 years of experience in media, web, publishing, and technology, Doug and his team work with businesses and associations to integrate traditional and digital communications, all with a focus on content marketing, advertising, and social media. So, Doug, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time to be here today for all of our listeners.
Oh, thank you, Bonnie. I'm very pleased to be on the show, and it's great to see your face and hear your voice again. We've been disconnected for too long, so thanks for reaching out.
Well, I want to jump right in and have our listeners have an opportunity to get to know you better. So, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your current business?
Sure. Without getting into the entire biography, which would be a lengthy one at my age, but I'm a maritimer born in Moncton, New Brunswick, and a railway brat. And so I've lived all over Canada, and Calgary actually was a sort of a relocation from the United States. We were down there in 2000, and we've been here so now 18 years, and love it in Calgary. It was kind of like coming home because we had lived previously for 20 years in Saskatoon, and as anybody who lives in Calgary knows, Calgary is basically just Saskatoon West. So, and the business, Communicado is the name of my business, and we do digital marketing, and that's just been a long-standing passion, blending digital stuff, internet stuff, and public relations, which I think I learned at the knee of my grandfather, and so I really feel like it runs in my blood.
And so I know that in your career, you made the jump from working in the corporate or agency world, as well as media, to starting Communicado a number of years ago. What inspired you to go out on your own and be that entrepreneur?
That's a great question. You know, about 8 or so years ago, the Globe and Mail did a piece that included a little mini profile of me and a couple of others. And they called us, I love the term, they called us accidental entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
It basically got laid off is the answer. The company that I was working for at the time in 2009 decided to do away with a layer of management. And sadly, I was in that layer. But in hindsight, it was the best opportunity ever. And I like to say that I don't know that I would have jumped off the cliff on my own, but since someone pushed me, you might as well look for a parachute. And at that moment in time, and they were very generous, and it was a very, well-managed transition. So I have no regrets or discomfort. But at the time, I went on a couple of job interviews, and I thought, I've done this. I was, fairly senior in my career at that moment, and I just really wanted to do something new. And ultimately, my wife, after one job interview, said, "If you take that job, I'll kill you." And okay, better start our own business then. So that's it was really that motivation that got us going back in 10 years ago, 2009.
And so, Doug, always one of the great challenges for entrepreneurs is that financing piece. So you are accidentally thrown into this situation. How did you get going from a financial perspective? And what can you share with our listeners that way?
I kind of think you either have to be old enough to be secure in money or young enough to not care about money. So we were the former. We were old enough to not have to worry too much about money. I had a good runway from the severance package that I got from the layoff. And I was able to sell consulting hours right away because of my fairly decent network and good folks that were like, "Oh yeah, you should come do a contract." And so it was actually a fairly painless transition for me, aside from the angst of the first 6 months of, "Ooh, is this what we're going to do?" and all that. But So yeah, I was really fortunate, and of course, consulting. I mean, what do you need but a laptop and a kitchen table, and then eventually a Starbucks, and then eventually a rented room, and then then an office at some point if you decide to go down that path. So the underpinnings, the costs were fairly minimal. It was just sell your hours and then sell somebody else's hours and then overhead after that. But yeah, it was. We were lucky. We didn't need financing. We bootstrapped the whole thing out of our own savings and just went for it.
Well, and where do you hope to go in the future? Do you have big growth plans for the company? I know you've got a fairly decent sized staff now and an
Yeah.
office in a very nice part of town. So,
Yeah.
what does the future hold for you?
Well, I think diversification is sort of our mantra right now, and that involves a number of different things, being open to different markets, different sectors, making sure we're not so dependent on Alberta only or Calgary only or oil and gas only. And so definitely, we do national work. We've done work with folks in Vancouver and Ottawa and Toronto and all over. But yeah, I don't want to get so big as we become a bit of a monolith. I like the small team culture. My team makes me happy. We laugh, we gossip, we talk about Game of Thrones, and so, I don't want to get to the point where it's just a corporation in that giant agency sense. So I think, we'll stick to more of the virtual agency model where we might, eventually put a person in name of city here and have a sort of a home-based or a work share type person that represents us in that city, but ultimately keeping the team lean and mean. And part of that is cash flow and financial. I saw in my very early in my career, I saw a lot of people start businesses, spend a ton of money on salaries and fancy cherrywood desks and leather chairs, and then promptly go out of business. And I guess it's probably the Scottish part of me that says, no, be frugal and, go for the long game, right? So, yeah, so I don't think we'll be huge, but I think we will spread our wings a little bit more.
Well, let's talk a little bit about doing business in Calgary, and you've talked about being thankful you weren't too energy centric over the last number of years, and you had a
Yeah.
diverse client base. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, what are some of the pros and cons about starting a business in Calgary?
Well, it might be a little hard for me to separate the Calgary environment from the national environment because the red tape is really quite a bit. there's a lot, whether it's licensing or how to incorporate or your annual returns or there's numerous sort of barriers to just getting on with it. And for somebody who is maybe just really passionate about digital comms, or if you're, I don't know, a plumber, getting set up is actually quite a pain. And then, of course, we've been seeing lately the tax imbalance due to the hollowing out of the downtown, which is causing a huge shift and a great deal of pain for a lot of small businesses. And so I think those things are challenging, but I see good people trying to work on them, and I'm hopeful for and optimistic for the future. But some of the more positive or optimistic things about Calgary is there is a huge entrepreneurial spirit in this town, and people are so encouraging and saying, yeah, go for it, and how can I send you some business, and how can we work together to promote each of us, and all that kind of stuff. And I find that the environment is welcoming and supportive, and so. Yeah, I just think that we'll weather this storm, and Calgary and Alberta are more than oil and gas, although obviously oil and gas is super important. And there's just all kinds of other pieces of work that you can do that are exciting here as well.
So, Doug, let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of your more personal favorite things or habits
Yeah.
as a business owner. So, one of the things I'd like to ask you is just where do you go to get inspired here locally in Calgary? Do you have a favorite spot that maybe you can go and do some thinking about your business, or it's just maybe it's a favorite place to go at the end of a busy work week and relax? Can you share a couple of your favorite spots with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so bar none, since I don't know the age of 3, I've been crazy about dogs. I love dogs. They make me happy, and so most of that kind of zen time is at a dog park for me. We live up in Edgemont, and so the Edgemont Ravine is fantastic. Because I'm a maritimer and I am who I am, I gab all the time. So the dog does her thing, and then I talk to all the people, and I meet all the crazy people in my neighborhood, and that's fun. And that's the time for me when my brain clears and the clutter goes, and I can just sort of, do that deeper thinking about life. I mean, not just the business, but just everything, right? Health, retirement, everything. And so, yeah, the varsity off leash is my favorite, but the Edgemont Ravine is the one right out behind my house, so it's pretty easy to get to. And then, yeah, we just go to all the parks, Edworthy or whatever the one is up by Deerfoot and Beddington, and so that's my main thing. Is I love walking and thinking, and again, that my grandpa instilled that in me. That he was, I think he had a bit of a heart scare. In the 60s or something, and so he took up walking, and so it was built into from the time I was 4 or 5 that before supper you go for a walk, after supper you go for a walk, and so now it's just built in, right? I don't know, it's a habit and I love it. But other than that, I like meeting people in the local pubs, and there's so many of those, but I tend to meet there's kind of one set of guy friends that we meet at the Oak Tree Tavern over here, and have a pint and talk politics, and lie to each other about all the things we pretend to know. and and then going for coffee here at Good Earth. I mean, Kensington is amazing for places to just eat, drink, chill, and interact with people. And so that I'm really happy our office is here, because it's fun for us, and it's easy for to lure people in to visit you and say, hey, let's go for lunch just down the street. And so yeah, those are many. Bowness Park, I think, is high on the list. Yeah, there's many things like that are but outdoorsy.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, so, what does the first hour of the day look like for you? Do you have some rituals or routines that kind of help get you set for the day and set up for a great day?
I do. It's funny that finally being an entrepreneur, I can do what I want in the morning, because I am absolutely hopeless in the morning. Like it's there's a Super 8 film of me where my parents had to wake me up for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
I am not a morning guy, and so I like to my alarm. I have multiple alarms. They go off 5:30, 6:30, and then usually around 6:45 I'm like, okay, fine. Get up, have a coffee, breakfast, look at my calendar, look at my task application, see what I have to do for the day. I would have done that the night before too, so it's really just to kind of get back in gear. Think about where I have to drive and commute, and who I'm going to interact with and all that. Then I take the dog for a walk. Then usually I play with the dog in the living room for a while with the snake and ball and bone and all the good things. And then, shower, get in the car, and off I go. Quite often I'll work from home, and those are days when I just want to put my nose to the grindstone, but we sort of have a loose tradition of Monday work from home. And so those are days when I just want to pound out reports or do things like that, do a lot of writing or thinking. And then, yeah, once I get here, just to the office, that is, or if I'm working from home, we do it on Slack and texting and whatnot. Just kind of see where everybody else is at, and where will I see you? When will I see you? Do you need help with this? Are there any roadblocks to helping this client, and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a 3-hour ritual to get me productive, really. And but yeah, by about 9:30, I'm alive and in the world again, and it's fine.
Well, and you reference Slack. Do you have any other online or in-office tools that you use to communicate or to ensure everyone's being productive and efficient?
Yeah, I'm a maniac for apps. It drives my team crazy. It's really beyond habit and into obsession, I think. But we've settled on so Google's G Suite is sort of our core thing, and then Asana for tasks, Slack for messaging. Right now, I'm hunting for a wiki intranet thing, but we're currently sort of half using Google Sites, but it's a bit dodgy, so I'm not thrilled with that. Airtable for database stuff. Yeah, and the list goes on, but those are the main things that we use. LastPass for password sharing, so that we can get new people onboarded and into apps quickly, and only buy one account instead of 6 for certain things, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, and being a digital agency, of course, we have a whole array of graphic building tools and social media management. We use Sprout Social and stuff like that. So lots and lots of apps, which is, as we've been onboarding these interns, I realized you have to parcel that out because it's a bit overwhelming until you get fully immersed in our culture.
Right, right. Now, what about books or podcasts? Do you have any you could recommend to our audience? Maybe a business book or two that you have found particularly helpful?
Yeah. Well, my all-time favorite, which I seem to every couple of years dredge up for the young people, is Positioning. I think Reese and Trout's Positioning is a classic. It influenced me way back in business school, and the updated versions have continued to influence me. And I really love that confluence of psychology and marketing and messaging, and sort of what spot do you occupy in somebody's brain. So definitely recommend Positioning. And then I'd say my favorite business book in the last 5 to 10 years has been David Meerman Scott's The New Rules of PR and Marketing. That to me is a seminal piece of work in my specific niche area, and it really encapsulates how you blend this stuff for the new PR, new marketing, which like all things new, it won't be new for long, right? And so that really it'll just be called PR and marketing again in 10 years. But for now, it's like, ooh, digital marketing, because people need to know that, you can help them through the transition. But I think of it like horseless carriage, right? It's one of those references that goes away over time because you're just thinking about what's in the rear view. But really, the new marketing is just marketing. It's with new tools. But yeah, so those are the 2 books that I really like a lot. And then Seth Godin, Avinash Kaushik does a lot of stuff on Occam's Razor is his blog, and that's analytics based. I really like the Sprout Social blog, and I'm kind of a voracious reader, but more in blog chunks. So yeah, all of those sort of niche kind of things that really attract me, and then the generalized, Maclean's, National Post, and all that for my own edification, I guess.
So you mentioned earlier in the interview that you've kind of felt like you've been destined to be in PR and media and advertising your entire life. But if you weren't doing what you're doing now, can you see yourself in any other type of profession?
I can. If I made a tiny, tiny jump, it would be to just pure writing of some sort. But probably it would be in a not-for-profit or something like that. And ultimately, that's probably where I'm headed in retirement someday, is to kind of get in and really help somebody change the world in some small way. And so that would be satisfying and keep me out of the house and out of mischief and all that. So I imagine that's where this will go. But yeah, I think I like, sometimes I joke, I like telling people what to do. I don't like doing things, which, which is, there's a grain of truth in there. Excuse me. And so I think I would like to sort of manage a team no matter what the circumstance was. That's my favorite thing, is getting people rowing in the same direction kind of makes me happy.
And so if we were to flip the question on its head, what is one profession you would just never be cut out to do?
I think I'm the prototypical communicator that anything to do with accounting, math, forms, linearity, I'm not into it at all. And so, yeah, obviously as a business owner, you deal with the accounting and you deal with all the stuff and so on. But I know these are areas of weakness and I bring in professionals to help me because otherwise, I'd take 4 times the time it's warranted. So yeah, I don't think those are my strengths. Economics, depth. I don't have any depth in science except social science.
Spoken like a true PR person. I can relate to that firsthand.
Yeah.
So, Doug, do you have like a favorite saying or a few words that you kind of maybe share with your colleagues at work, or something that is I guess more of a personal mantra for you?
Yeah, I do. Let's see, I might even have it right here. Hang on. I do. It's right here framed on my. Okay, let's see if I can. Now, this is something I got ages ago. Can you see that? Kind of can see it,
Yeah.
but it's backwards. So it's the old nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, press on, has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. And this little framed print says that attributes that to Calvin Coolidge, although I know that's up for some debate. But I love that, the idea of just soldier on, just keep going. And I truly believe that is the doing something is better than doing nothing, right? If I don't have the perfect accounting system, I better have some accounting system, and so on. And that's really what I've taken to heart in building my business is perfection is paralysis. Just go for the next best step you can get to, and then keep stepping, and eventually you'll be like, wow, that miles ago we did that really poorly, and now we do it fantastic. And so that's it's an easy mantra to live by too, if you just sort of focus your mind.
Right, right. Well, I'm curious, what do you have on your inspired life list or bucket list? What are some things, can you share maybe 2 or 3 things that you hope to do either personally or professionally over the next few years?
Yeah, well, travel. I love languages. I love culture. I love food. I love visual feasts. So certainly there's large chunks of the world that I have not been to yet, and would like to. So with any luck, we'll create the circumstances for that to happen. And then I think taking some stronger place in shaping society, which is a bit vague. But for example, just recently in the Alberta election, I helped out a friend of mine that was running for office. He did not win. He was up against a very solid incumbent. But it was a great experience for me to say, I want to get involved in democracy. And, that's important these days, right? Because we're living in what seem like contentious times, and I think protecting the value of Canada and the things that we hold dear, multiculturalism and the plurality of our society, is something worth rolling up your sleeves and getting into. So those are a couple of things. See the world, maybe fix one thing in the world someday. Kind of chip away at it. Yeah, those are things I'd like to do.
Great. Well, we have actually quite a few international listeners to the podcast.
Mm,
So I'm curious, if you were to start all over again in Calgary,
yeah.
knowing what you know now, like what would you do, or what advice would you give to someone who's looking to start fresh here in the city and build a business?
I think the best advice that I could give, which is maybe a little bit vague, but it's find people to help you and lift you up. You're not on your own. And whether that's the Business Development Bank of Canada or members of CPRS or IABC in our particular profession, or you get a network of people and ask for help, ask for advice. If you were to move here from another country, It probably, with just a few questions to a few choice people, you'd be able to find a reasonably cheap office downtown these days. And that would maybe be the difference between your business succeeding and not succeeding. So, the Chamber, Calgary Economic Development, but anyway, reach out. You're not an island. Don't fly solo. You don't have all the ideas, and just be open to people saying, hey, did you consider this? I think that's a universal thing, not a Calgary thing per se. But like I said, in Calgary, people are so willing to help your business succeed if you just let them. I really couldn't believe 10 years ago when I just finally said, okay, I'm going to start a business. And people were like, thank God you decided, let us help you. And I was like, oh, all I had to do was hang out my shingle and say so. And then things happened. And that was amazing too, that people were at the ready. I just had to commit.
Well, I think that's great advice, and certainly people. You're right. This is a city where people are more than happy to play a role in each other's success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Doug, to start to wind things down here today, I'd like to ask you a hypothetical question that we ask all of our listeners, or pardon me, all of the people we interview. So if you could imagine that there's a small tropical island where there is no internet, there's no connectivity. I know. No connectivity. So we're going to drop you off there, but you won't have any of your digital tools.
Yeah.
How long do you think that you would last before you'd need to call us to come pick you up? There is a phone booth, so you'll be able to do it the old-fashioned way when that time arises.
Okay.
And secondly, what would you do while you're there?
I have actually had something like this experience. As a tween and a teenager, I did a lot of summer camp stuff with the YMCA, mostly around the Lake of the Woods and Camp Stevens. And on one of those summers on the canoe trip, they had a section where they took you out in a boat to an island and then said, here, survive overnight, and your job is set up a lean-to, get your sleeping bag in a safe place, and start a fire. So that went reasonably well until it came to the time for me to start the fire. And what I didn't realize is that there was really dry moss underneath the surface wet moss. And so I started my fire. And now this was a tiny, tiny island, like the size of my office. So, when I woke up in the morning, the whole island was smoldering. I had set the place on fire. And they had to come rescue me. So, so I'm not convinced I'd last much more than about 12 hours. But you know what? I like tropical islands, and so maybe I would if necessity was the mother of invention. But my first go at that as a 14-year-old was a dismal failure. Yeah.
That's a great story.
It's so stupid. I can't believe it. But who knew? Who knew? Yeah.
Well, Doug, how can our listeners connect with you, either online or in the real world? Where can we send them to find out more about you and your business?
Yeah, so communicato.com, that's communicato with 2 T's. People often miss that. But really, I've been on the internet and doing web publishing for so long. If you just type in Doug Lacombe in Google, I'll show up. And if it's not me, it's my grandfather. He's long since passed, rest in peace. So it won't be him. And there's a guy in Louisiana with my name. So there's only 3 of us. One is gone. So, Doug Lacombe, Google, I'm there. That's my business card now.
Awesome. Any other final parting words before we say goodbye today?
I would just say that if you are thinking of starting a business, or if you have a business now and you're struggling or you feel constrained, please reach out to me, reach out to others, reach out to, there's senior organizations like the executive committee, tech. There's so many places to go for help, and our economy needs it right now. So don't be shy. That would be my final thing is, we're all better off if the economy is better off. And all boats rise on a tide. So let's help each other out.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you so much, Doug, for being a guest on our show today.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed chatting with you. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot from you, and we appreciate you being a guest.
Anytime. Always a pleasure.
So this is Bonnie Elgie. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to listen today to Calgary's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please make sure that you sign up for our newsletters, and if you have a minute, please write us a review on iTunes. You can also connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Canada's Podcast, and check out what other entrepreneurs are doing across the country. We'll see you next time.